26.11 is going to be another patch with some big meta implications, as we've got a ton of item and rune changes that will influence support, as we'll be shifting away from enchanters towards melee engaged supports. 9 different champions are being adjusted as well, so we'll have the complete breakdown and analysis of every single change and an update to the solo queue tier list for every single role. But first, are you someone that suffers from acute hard stuck syndrome? Symptoms include getting 13 kills and still losing, compulsive missing ping usage, tilt-induced mental boom, and an unshakable belief that next game will be different. Well, you're not alone. Countless players suffer from AHS every single season, but there is a cure! SkillCapped is the world's leading prescribed treatment for acute heart stuck syndrome, and your treatment plan begins with our Season 16 Essentials. One course for every role split into easy and digestible chapters, with each one designed to walk you through every stage of the game from start to finish. From learning the exact trading and recall timers you need to win in lane, to mid-game decisions 99% of players get completely wrong, all the way to the team-fighting tips and tricks challengers abuse to always deal the highest damage possible. For more advanced cases, your treatment continues with our weekly challenger commentaries, where our specialists walk you through exactly how to carry in your elo on your chosen champion. And for our most severe patients, our world record jungle clears for every meta champion, with the exact routes, tips, and tricks our patients are abusing to clear faster than ever before. Side effects may include rapid LP gain, sudden loss of tilt, improved mental, and finally hitting your peak rank. Climb at least 5 divisions or your money-back guarantee applies while actively using our service. And no, this is not a joke. Consult the exclusive discount link in the pinned comment or description below to begin your treatment today. So let's start the video by covering all the item and rune changes, and first will be a buff to Aftershock. Base resists are going up while the scaling resists are dropping, so this will be more of a significant buff to support champions since they have a harder time gaining access to resists from items and therefore benefit more from base stat buffs. Change should still be a net buff for tanks in other roles as well, but just not as significant. So the champions who were taking Aftershock the most in 26.10 who will be locks to benefit from these buffs in 26.11 include Rammus, Leona, Rel, Nautilus, Sejuani, Alistar, Maokai, Thresh, Galio, Zac, and Nunu. Another support keystone rune is going to be buffed for this patch, with Guardian receiving a few changes. The cooldown on Guardian is dropping by 15 seconds in the early game, so a big buff for laning phase. Shield amount is going down though from 45 scaling to 180 to 40 scaling to 150. The bonus health scaling on the shield is up though from 5 to 6%, while the AP ratio is down from 25 to 20%. So the champions who will indirectly benefit the most from these Guardian changes for this upcoming patch include Braum, Rakan, Renata Glass, while Taric and Thresh also like to take Guardian from time to time. There is also Shen Jungle who likes to take Guardian as well, so he's one to benefit too. A few tanks will become better for this patch, with Heartsteel having its damage to permanent health conversion increased from 8 to 10%. So a nice indirect buff to the likes of Mundo, Tahm Kench, Sejuani, Cho'Gath, and Skarner. Sejuani is one champion specific who should be more interesting to pay attention to in 26.11 because she will benefit from Aftershock buffs, Heartsteel buffs, and can look to build Zeke's, which is getting a buff. Up next, we have 3 different support items receiving buffs, and Knight's Vow is first up as its damage reduction is being increased from 12 to 14%, while the heal ratio is going from 10 to 12%. So this one is an indirect buff to many engaged supports, as Thresh, Braum, Nautilus, Leona, Alistar, Taric, and Rakan can all look to benefit. Locket is going to receive a stat buff, with its armor and magic resist being increased from 25 to 30. Locket is a very commonly purchased rush item on a ton of melee supports, so this just straight up buffs that class of champions for 26.11. And then Zeke's is the third engaged support item being adjusted, with its passive being changed to where it will now wait up to 5 seconds after casting your R for a valid enemy to be close enough to you before triggering the storm effect. So this one is interesting because it will more positively impact some champs more than others. If you are playing Rakan and are diving in with R, it's very likely you will be close enough to a target to proc the Zeke's passive, so we don't really see this helping him out a ton. Someone like Leona though could benefit more because if she uses her R from range and then waits a second or two to dive in with E, she will get a bit longer uptime on Zeke's passive prior to before. Alistar may actually benefit the most out of all champs because he's not always using his R while he's engaging. Sometimes you just pop Alistar R to soak damage and are not actually going in right away, so if you pop your R and are running away and just waiting for for cooldowns to come back up, then Zeke's will be a lot more consistent on him now in those situations. Lots of nerfs to enchanter-related runes and items for this patch, starting with Dreammaker. The damage reduction is being changed from 75 scaling to 255, only affecting the first instance of damage, to now 50 scaling to 194, but affecting the entire first damaging spell. The damage from Dreammaker is going from 50 scaling to 170, triggering on hit, to now 40 scaling to 160, triggering on damaging attack or ability with AoE reduction for AoE triggers. So the damage reduction and damage that you get from Dreammaker is dropping. However, it does look like the rune will have more consistency to it. So how hard this nerf lands is kind of tough to say, but it will influence the majority of enchanters. Echoes of Helia will receive a small nerf, with its damage stored going down from 35 to 30%. Sona, Seraphine, Melio, and Karma were the champs building Echoes the most last patch, so they will be most negatively impacted by the nerf. Moonstone is getting nerfed so that the Starlight Grace unique effect no longer double dips in heal and shield power and grievous wounds. Your most common Moonstone users from last patch include Soraka, Janna, Yuumi, Melio, Karma, Ivern, Lulu, Nami, Sona, and Seraphine. The Aerie Keystone rune will be losing some shield value for 26.11 as it's dropping from 30 scaling to 100 to 20 scaling to 100. Just a flat out nerf to most enchanters for next patch, and with the buffs to Guardian, it will be interesting to see if Guardian becomes a more attractive pickup in certain matchups on enchanters. It's been a pretty dragon-centric meta for Season 16 thus far, so Riot's looking to put some power back into Void Grubs for 26.11. The structural dot damage that you get from the buff is going up from 3 scaling to 12 to 4 scaling to 16 for melee champs, and from 1.5 scaling to 6 to 2 scaling to 8 for ranged champs. Void Grubs will also be tankier, as they will have the exact same health as a melee minion instead of 60% of their health. So Void Grubs giving you more damage and also becoming tankier. Not buffs that really jump out at you and scream that Void Grubs will be OP now, but at the very least, you're getting a bit better of a consolation prize if you just don't have priority over bot lane and cannot contest that early dragon. Experimental Hexblade has been a really OP item on Vayne and Varus for a while now, so Riot has decided to nerf the item on ranged characters only, with its passive attack speed going down from 50 to 35% and its movement speed dropping from 20 to 14%. So it is really only Vayne and Varus who will negatively be impacted by this nerf, and then Zeri buys the item sometimes, so she probably just drops it completely now. Arguably the biggest item change of the patch is going to Imperial Mandate, as it's getting a mini rework. Its passive is being changed so that you now need to immobilize a target in order to proc the damage boost. Slowing a target does not count as an immobilizing effect, which means Nami is going to become much worse with Mandate moving forward. You would now need to land Nami Q or R in order to proc Mandate, and that's just not reliable at all, so it's quite likely that Nami has a new core build in the works for 26.11. When you immobilize a target, you are also going to gain 15 ability haste, so you really need to be playing champs with easy to hit immobilizing effects in order to gain the most value out of the item. To complete Mandate, you are going to need a Blasting Wand, Bandoglass Mirror, and 700 gold, with the total cost of the item coming in at 2400 gold. The item stats will include 65 ability power, 15 ability haste, and 150% base mana regen. So with the previous version of Mandate, whether you slowed or immobilized a target, you would gain access to the passive, but now you need to immobilize a target, which will make proccing the passive a lot less reliable for many champs. In theory, champions who have easier to land immobilizing abilities would find the most success with Mandate, so we could see it purchased on melee engaged supports like Rakan, Maokai, or Alistar, because the passive would be very reliable on them. Is there a world where someone like Galio could like Mandate now because it's a cheap item that will be extremely easy for him to proc? If you were to hit a multi-man Galio W in a fight, then the 6% damage boost would be really high value. Nico kind of feels like the one range support who could benefit more than others, just because if she got a multi-man R off in a fight, then you would be getting insane value from the new Mandate passive. Catch supports like Zoe, Lux, and Morgana also seem like they should be frontrunners to succeed with it. So we've got some Deathfire Touch changes in store for this patch, as the damage type is being changed from adaptive to magic. The reason this change is being issued is so that the rune no longer has synergy with Black Cleaver. In order to stack Black Cleaver's passive, you need to be dealing physical damage, so by swapping the damage type to magic only, it now means Deathfire won't give you stacks of Cleaver's passive. It doesn't really make the rune any worse though on AD champs who like to run Deathfire but didn't go Black Cleaver. If anything, Deathfire is now stronger on champs like Gangplank and Jhin because enemies will be prioritizing armor against you, so you should get more value out of Deathfire damage with it now being magic damage. This is a complete no impact change for mages who run Deathfire Touch, because with the damage type being adaptive before, that just meant that you would either deal magic or physical based on which type of damage you had more of, and because mages build ability power, they were already dealing magic damage from Deathfire Touch all along. So Smolder, Gangplank, Senna, Yorick, Naafiri, and Jhin will be the main champions to watch for 26.11, as they will be most heavily influenced by this adjustment. And then one last item change to cover, as Static Shiv is going to have its AD increased from 40 to 45. We've seen Shiv become pretty popular on a few champions after its rework, most notably Teemo, but other champs who can benefit from this buff include Senna, Varus, Kalista, Xin Zhao, Kai'Sa, Volibear, and Kayle. So moving on to all the top lane changes now. Heimerdinger is being adjusted because with Riot making the change to minions in 26.10 to where you can no longer auto minions to pull them into your turret range, it's led to a decrease in power for Heimer, so they are buffing its turret range to compensate. Range on turrets is going from 530 to 550, and it's actually up from 530 to 600 against minions. The vision duration of Heimer's E is buffed as well, being increased from 1 to 1.25 seconds. So prior to this minion change, Heimer was a really good S tier top laner, but then fell off a bit last patch, so we're going to continue to have him placed in the S tier, as these buffs should remove that inconsistency that he was dealing with in 26.10. Teemo has been an OP tier top lane champ since his direct buffs and the rework to Static Shiv, so Riot has a few nerfs in the works for 26.11. Teemo's E on hit bonus AD ratio is going down from 10 to 5%, and Poison bonus AD ratio is dropping from 20 to 10%. What's really interesting here is that when you have Static Shiv completed, from the testing we've done on PvE, you aren't losing any damage on your autos. You can see that in both of the clips, the damage is the exact same, so unless the changes weren't added correctly to the PvE, then it looks like this nerf is not going to hurt at all. There is one more nerf being issued as well, to where Teemo's armor growth is going down from 4.95 to 4.5. This one will hurt a bit, as base stat nerfs are always more impactful than you'd think, so we don't think Teemo will be losing a top tier spot for 26.11, but we will be dropping him out of the OP tier and into S. So if we have a look at the top lane tier list for 26.11, we're making a bunch of adjustments, as with Teemo falling out of the OP tier, we're going to be promoting Malphite alongside Kayle. Malphite has been performing incredibly well as of late and has taken over Ornn as the best solo queue tank after Ornn received those direct nerfs. Yone is in a really good spot for top right now because of the Doran's Bow item addition. Item is completely outperforming Doran's Blade on top lane Yone, and he's currently finding way more success in the top lane than in mid. This is likely due to the fact that you have the longer lane up in top, which means you can more consistently take extended trades and get the most value out of that attack speed from Doran's Bow. Vayne is being dropped down the tier list because of the experimental Hexblade nerfs, and then Vlad is also being adjusted down lower because it turns out that the nerfs to Deathfire from last patch have impacted him quite negatively. Gangplank is one top laner to keep an eye on this patch because of the changes to Deathfire Touch. In theory, Deathfire should be getting stronger on Gangplank because of the damage type being magic, as the enemy top laner will want to itemize armor against you, so your Deathfire will be dealing more damage than before. We already have GP up in the S tier though, so that's where he's going to stay, as we don't think the Deathfire change will be significant enough to warrant a push into OP. With the recent nerfs to Dusk and Dawn, Diana has really taken a beating and had not been performing very well at all over the past patch, so Riot's going to be buffing her passive monster damage, going from 230 to 270%. W shield bonus health ratio is buffed as well, going from 9 to 11% health. So definitely more of a buff to the Bruisery Diana jungle setup that we are seeing right now with the core of Dusk and Dawn into Riftmaker. For Diana's tier list placement, the buffs should end up pushing her back into a good spot for this patch, so she's going to land in the jungle A tier. Echo Jungle has been another culprit of the Dusk and Dawn nerfs, as he's fallen off a decent amount as of late, so Riot will be buffing his passive with the per target cooldown being lowered from 5 to 4 seconds. So nothing that should boost Echo's power by a crazy amount, but enough to where we're going to be moving him out of the B tier and into A. Riot tried to push Quinn into the jungle last patch, but the buffs were nowhere near enough to do so, and they are back again in 26.11 with a second round of buffs to try to get her in a decent spot. Passive bonus monster damage is being increased from 50 to 75, while Q monster damage is going up from 150 to 200%. Prior to these buffs, Quinn jungle was tracking at a 43% win rate over a significant sample size, so unless these buffs add multiple percent to that, which we don't think that they will, she's going to remain a suboptimal solo queue jungler. There's a chance the buffs are enough to boost her win rate by 2 or 3%, and if they do that, then she would be worthy of an addition to the tier list in the C tier, so we're going to place her in C for now, but if nothing comes of these buffs over the next few patches, then we may just end up removing her completely. It's kind of like when Riot buffed Neela and Vayne in the jungle. We had them in C tier for one patch, but then they never actually gained any sort of traction and have non-existent play rates now, so we wouldn't be surprised if something similar happens for Quinn. AP variant Xin Zhao builds have been popping up lately in top, jungle, and mid, so Riot will be adjusting him in 26.11 to reduce the healing from his passive. Passive heal AP ratio will be lowered from 50 scaling to 90% to 45 scaling to 80%. As we can see from the comparison clips, you would have been getting a heal for 250 in 26.10 with the core of Dusk and Dawn and Nashers, but that will now drop to 234 with this nerf. There is a compensation buff though to his passive damage, as it will now have a ratio that scales from 5 to 20% AP. So all in all, these changes should shouldn't really influence Xin Zhao's standing in the current meta as a jungler, so we'll be leaving him in S for now. So if we have a look at the complete jungle tier list, it's going to continue to be Nocturne as the lone OP tier pick, as there are no changes in 26.11 that suggest he's going to be dethroned of that spot. With the Quinn jungle pick getting buffed for 2 patches in a row, our challenger experts have completed an optimal clear guide for her so that you can get the fastest clear speed possible, and have added the video to our clear course that's up on our website, which features the most optimal clears for every meta jungler in the game. If you're a jungle main, then this course alone is worth the SkillCapped subscription, as we've got every clear optimized for each jungler and edited so that you can follow along super easily and perfect your jungle clears for Season 16. Echo moving up the tier list is the only noteworthy jungle change of the patch, but a few tank junglers should be on your radar for 26.11 as well. Rammus is already up in the S tier, but with the buffs to Aftershock, he's going to be looking even better and could be on the verge of an OP tier promotion. Definitely one of the best low elo junglers you can play right now, as we've got him in our top 3 for low elo. Sejuani is one to keep an eye on as well, because she not only likes the Aftershock buffs, but also benefits from Heartsteel buffs. Diving into the mid lane changes now, we have some buffs to Kassadin on the way, with his Q cooldown dropping from 10 scaling to 8 seconds to 9 scaling to 7 seconds. W damage is going up as well from 20 to 25. So not changes that are going to move the needle enough to push Kassadin back into a top tier spot. At the very most, he moves into A tier, but for now, we're going to keep him placed in B. So mid lane is pretty light for this patch, with just Echo, Xin Zhao, Diana, and Kassadin being the champions impacted by changes. Echo is actually finding a lot more success in the mid lane recently than in jungle, and it's due to how strong Hail of Blades is on him right now, coupled with Lichbane getting buffed last patch. With Echo directly buffed for 26.11, we expect for him to be one of the best mids, and he's placed up in the S tier to reflect that. Mid lane Diana doesn't actually benefit as much from the W health scaling buff as jungle does, because mid Diana likes to build more bursty items that don't have any health. As a result, we really don't see the Diana buff doing that much, which is actually a good thing because she's already been an S tier mid as of late. Xin Zhao is losing some healing on passive for this patch, but gaining some damage and compensation, and when you factor in that Static Shiv is being buffed, we still think he should be a strong mid lane pick. Maybe the healing nerf hits a bit harder and he drops down to A tier, but we can't see him completely falling out of a top tier spot due to the changes. Galio is one to watch for this patch because of the Aftershock buffs and the Imperial Mandate changes. Who knows if Mandate actually ends up being a viable item for him, but if there is a mid lane champ who would benefit from the changes, it would be Galio due to how easy it is for him to immobilize a target and proc the passive damage amp. You also get the bonus ability haste after proccing Mandate passive now, so that just means more rotations of spells for Galio and skirmishes, which is super impactful too. With how consistent it would be for Twisted Fate to proc Mandate's passive, there is a chance he could like the item as well. Smolder is the only ADC being directly changed for 26.11, as his passive bonus magic damage on Q is being lowered from 40 scaling to 60% of passive stacks to 25 scaling to 55% of passive stacks. Passive bonus magic damage on E is being reduced as well, going from 12% of passive stacks to 8 scaling to 12% of passive stacks. So even with the synergy between Deathfire Touch and Black Cleaver being removed for this patch, Riot still thinks Smolder would remain in an overly powerful spot, which is why they are directly nerfing him. Despite the synergy between Cleaver and DFT being removed, Deathfire should still be a viable keystone for Smolder. The fact it deals magic damage is actually better than before if you weren't building Black Cleaver, because you're getting more of a mixed damage profile. Even with all the nerfs, considering how hard Smolder was overperforming this past patch, we can't see him falling out of meta. With so many factors at play, it's hard to get an accurate read on exactly where he will land, so for now, we're going to keep him placed in the OP tier. So with Smolder getting weaker, we're going to be moving Jinx and Ashe up into the OP tier to join him, as we think these 3 ADCs will be the best of the patch and around the same power levels now. With the shift toward melee supports for 26.11, we think Samira and Neela should both benefit greatly. Both those ADCs want to play with more aggro supports who are diving in and enabling them in teamfights, so Samira and Neela are both up in the S tier. Senna is dropping down the tier list because so much of her strength recently has been directly tied to the Black Cleaver with Deathfire synergy, and she wasn't performing nearly as well as Smolder, so we don't think she holds up quite as good after the nerf to the synergy. Varus ADC has really been liking Static Shiv as his rush item lately, and with the item getting buffed for this patch, we're going to move him up to the A tier. Brand is going to be losing some base armor this patch, so that will influence his strength as a bot lane carry, but Brand has been sitting above a 53% win rate recently, so even with that armor nerf going through, we don't see it being enough to drop him out of the S tier. So speaking of Brand, he is the only support champion on the change list, which makes sense considering there are so many different item and rune changes that are going to influence the role. Brand will see his base armor drop from 27 to 24, so a decent hit that should end up dropping his win rate somewhere between 1 and 2%. Brand has been right on the fence between S and A tier over the past patch, so with the nerf going through, we think he'll settle out as a good A tier pick. So it's about time we actually see an interesting patch for the support role, but I guess it depends on which archetype of supports you like to play as to how happy you're going to be with the direction of the changes. It doesn't take a rocket scientist scientists to realize that enchanters are losing power for this patch, and melee engaged supports are gaining in strength. Not only did we see melee support runes and items get buffed, but enchanter items and runes got nerfed, so it's a pretty big swing towards melee support priority. What's interesting about this, and what we are worried about, is that melee supports, despite not being the most popular as of recent, have actually been pretty good power-wise. Leona, Rel, Thresh, Taric, Braum, Blitz, and Maokai have all been up over 50% win rates, so it's not like they have been struggling by any means. Leona and Rel in specific are two melee supports who have been performing above average lately, so we're pretty optimistic that they will become two of the powerhouse support pickups moving forward. Rel benefits a ton from this patch because Aftershock is buffed, and then she can also benefit from the Locket, Knight's Vow, and Zeke's buffs. 26.11 may be the patch that we look back on as the extinction of Nami as a priority support pickup. With Imperial Mandate's passive no longer proccing on slowing effects, it's not going to synergize with Nami's E, and therefore the item will become very inconsistent on her. Maybe we are overestimating the severity of this change, but for now we are dropping Nami down into the B tier, as there is not another rush item in 26.10 that was even close to performing as well as Mandate did on Nami. So those are all the adjustments we'll be making for now, but it's extremely likely that there are more changes that we will have to make for the updated tier list next week once we see how everything shakes out on the live servers, so be sure to check back next Monday for the completely accurate support tier list. But while lists like these show you what to play, our brand new Season 16 Essentials courses for every role teach you how to win, each designed to walk you through every stage of the game from start to finish, from the exact trading and recall timers you need to win lane, to the mid-game macro decisions 99% of players get completely wrong, all the way to the team fighting tips and tricks challengers abuse to always deal the highest damage possible. Whether you're a top laner in the most unfavorable matchup possible, a mid laner having to deal with everybody in your lane 24/7, a jungler trying to balance ganking with farming, an ADC stuck trying to hard carry with a support who just exists to grief you, or a support that's struggling to carry games on your own. Our Essentials courses are tailor-made to focus on the exact concepts that actually matter for climbing on your role in your elo. Check them out today, completely risk-free, using the link in the pinned comment or description below, as if you don't climb at least 5 divisions, you get every penny back. So that's gonna wrap everything up for the 26.11 edition of the Solo Queue tier list. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.